We kindle this symbol of our community of faith for the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the fire of commitment.
Good morning, I'm LB, your Director of Music and Worship Arts. I use the pronouns he, him, and his. This morning we begin with a traditional Easter tune, Now the Green Blade Riseth. Actually, the tune is a Christmas tune, Noel Nouvelet, that Easter words were written to, but a long, long time ago. It's not one that we sing here a lot, so I'm going to ask our Associate Director of Music, Annemarie Rachman, to play a full verse of it before we start. And as always, you are welcome to stand when you sing, sit if it's more comfortable, or dance if you feel appropriate.
This morning, I'd like to extend our welcome to any new visitors or folks who maybe haven't been here in a while, whether you are here with us in the sanctuary or joining us via live stream. It is a blessing to come together in community this morning, just as we do each Sunday. And this upcoming Saturday, we'll be hosting Hives for an all-ages workshop to make mutant puppets, or so I hear. And so that will be led by trans queer puppeteer Eli Nixon. And Hives invites you to come create puppets with us as we imagine and begin revealing more just futures. You can check the newsletter or ask Jessica Stokes for more information, including how to register. And as we gather this morning, we acknowledge that the church occupies the traditional and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe people. And in reminding ourselves of this each Sunday, we call ourselves to build accountable relationships of solidarity with Indigenous communities. Here at UU Lansing, we also affirm that Black Lives Matter, and we strive to draw our circle ever wider as we build beloved community here and in the world around us. And on this Transgender Day of Visibility, we also uplift all of our trans and non-binary and gender non-conforming kin. We are a dazzling bouquet made infinitely more fabulous when each of us can be known as our authentic selves. And today, especially, but each day, we see your joy. We see our joy. And as we gather for worship, each of our sacred bodies enters into the space, and together we form a sacred communal body together. And in this time, I invite you, as LB already has for singing, but in general, take care of your body, your mind, your spirit in whatever way works for you, because this is a space of care. And with that, I now invite us into a moment of hospitality. So first, those of us who are here in the sanctuary can greet those of us on the live stream by waving to the cameras. And now I invite us to welcome those we share space with.
morning. We've been in faith development this month. We've been talking a lot about transformation. So we end this month of transformation with The Easter Story by Brian Wildsmith. And I'm gonna read a bit of an abridged version. Once, a long time ago, a little donkey was brought to Jesus. The little donkey had never been ridden before, but Jesus spoke gently to him, and soon he stopped being afraid. Jesus climbed on the donkey's back, and they set off for Jerusalem. As they drew near to the city, there were great crowds of people standing by the road. The little donkey was amazed to see so many people. Some had spread their clothes along the road. Branches cut down from palm trees were spread there too, all for him to walk on. By the time they reached Jerusalem, the crowds were filled with excitement. Some people were asking, "Who's that on the back of the donkey?" Others replied, "It is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee." The little donkey carried Jesus through the streets until they stopped in front of the temple. Jesus went inside and saw that it was full of people busy buying and selling. He drove them all out, shouting, "My house is supposed to be a house of prayer, not a den of thieves." For the rest of that week, the donkey stayed with Jesus in the city. On Thursday night, they walked through the streets to a small house, and Jesus went in to have supper with his friends. "Take and eat this," said Jesus. "It is my body." And the donkey watched as Jesus lifted up a cup of wine. "Take and drink this," Jesus said. After supper, the little donkey followed Jesus and his friends to the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus said to them, "Sit here and keep watch while I pray." The donkey sat and waited, but everyone else fell asleep. Suddenly a crowd came into the garden. They were led by one of Jesus' friends, and they seized him and dragged him away. At last, they came to the house of the high priest. The donkey heard the high priest ask Jesus, "Are you the Son of God?" "I am," Jesus replied. Then the high priest said, "You have heard these terrible words. What do you say?" "He deserves to die," everybody cried. The little donkey watched as Jesus stood in front of Pilate and a huge crowd of people. "Are you the King of the Jews?" asked Pilate. "Those are your words," said Jesus. Then the priests accused Jesus of many things. "What shall I do with him?" asked Pilate. "Crucify him," they all shouted. So the soldiers took Jesus away. They put a crown made of thorns on his head and made fun of him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. They gave him a huge cross of wood and forced him to carry it. The little donkey followed as they led Jesus to a hill outside the city. There they crucified him between two thieves. Late that night, a rich man named Joseph asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. Joseph placed the body of Jesus on the donkey's back, and the little donkey carried it to a new tomb which had been cut out of the rock. Early on Sunday, 2 of Jesus' friends came to the tomb. But when they got there, they found that the stone had been rolled away and the body of Jesus was gone. The donkey saw 2 angels where Jesus' body has been. "He is not here," the angel said. "He is alive again." The women left the tomb and the donkey followed until they came to a garden. A man was standing there. The women thought he was the gardener, but the little donkey knew who that was. The women were frightened, but Jesus said to them, "Don't be afraid. Run and tell my friends to go up to Galilee, and they will see me there." Jesus' friends were so happy to see him again. He stayed with them for 40 days, but Jesus knew that it was time for him to leave this earth. As the sun rose one morning, he went up to heaven. The next day, one of Jesus' friends took the little donkey back to his home, and the little donkey stayed there for the rest of his life, remembering the kind and good man he had carried on his back to Jerusalem.
Good morning. I'm Annemarie. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Most of us have heard stories about two people, spouses, partners, siblings, even close friends, whose bond in life was so complete that upon the death of one, the other died of heartbreak mere hours or days later. Such instances are dramatic, even romantic, but they're relatively rare. For most of us, when we lose someone we love, our lives must go on. When we experience a significant loss of any kind, we grieve. We grieve in waves, at times in danger of drowning, at others registering only faint sadness like gentle laps onto the shore. We grieve if our time and circumstances make it possible. We grieve if our hearts and minds will allow it, and if they won't, our bodies often translate that grief into depression, illness, and pain. 25 years ago, I began working as a research assistant on a study testing the effect of a mental health intervention delivered in a primary care setting. Patients were eligible if they'd had 8 or more visits to their primary care clinic in the previous 12 months for things other than routine care. These patients complained of vague symptoms that were difficult to observe or quantify. Their complaints had been studied by all manner of diagnostic tests and imaging, but had failed to register anything perceptible to anyone but the patients themselves. The premise of the study was that such patients with unrecognized anxiety or depression, unresolved trauma or grief that negatively affected their health would respond positively to the psychosocial relationship-based intervention and experience fewer unexplained symptoms as a result. At regular intervals, the research team met for updates on a variety of study issues, and sometimes we had case studies. A provider would present a case study. At one such meeting, a provider presented the case of a woman in her mid-50s who had repeatedly complained of arm pain that they'd not been able to explain by means of any medical test. She said the elbow often felt stiff and achy and that she experienced muscle strain when she attempted to extend the arm fully. The woman had had a difficult early life, but by middle age had long since found contentment with a loving spouse and a good job that afforded security and leisure. She'd been pregnant. The only thing she'd longed for that she didn't have was children. She'd been pregnant several times, but each pregnancy had ended in miscarriage very early on. Her last pregnancy continued past all the previous ones, and eventually she allowed herself to imagine having a healthy baby. When the day came, the delivery went smoothly, but sadly the baby was not healthy, and it died 3 days later. The woman was devastated. At this point, the provider telling the story pushed their chair back from the table and demonstrated how the patient was positioned, sitting up on the edge of the examining table. The patient was in tears, describing how the infant had died in her arms and holding her arm in a cradling position, that same arm that had been causing so much pain for her over the last years. It turned out that the patient had been unable to adequately grieve the loss of the child she longed for so badly due to circumstances out of her control. And so there she was, tears streaming down her face, ever so lightly, rocking that child back and forth in her arm. Grief is necessary. Sorry, that story always chokes me up. If we're lucky, when we experience significant losses, we're able to be deeply immersed in our grief. I say lucky because when we are able to plumb the depths of our grief and resurface in our own time, we can do more than simply get over it. We can transform that grief into gifts which outlast our pain and sustain us through other losses and difficulties. We can transform our grief over the death of someone who brought us joy by gratefully recalling the good times we shared. We can transform our grief over opportunities lost to the past by seizing new opportunities, by planning, trying, and hoping again. We can transform grief over things we needed to be whole and healthy that were denied to us at crucial stages in our lives by tending to our own needs in the present, lovingly and without guilt or apology. We can transform our grief for lives ravaged by poverty, despair, and injustice into action, leveraging our relative privilege and raising our voices in unison with others. When we're willing and able to grieve a loss adequately, we can transform it into hope, gratitude, self-care, personal healing, and good acts bestowed upon others. Come, let us worship, grateful for opportunities to transform grief into something that ensures that losses are integrated into ourselves, such that we have more and are more than before those losses.
On the last Sunday of each month, we take a few moments at UU Lansing to acknowledge the brokenheartedness and grief that one or many of us may feel. This morning, we join with Laurel Ponist, who recently experienced the death of half-brother David Komotsi on February 16th. Laurel tells me that she and David found each other through the recent use of DNA through 23andMe, which brought them together. So we join with Laurel in her heartbrokenness at the loss of her brother David. On this Easter Sunday, I think about my own theology of death and life after. And the life after death that I give my loved ones is in remembering them in the ways that they touched my life and in the ways that I have been changed. For I give them life through mine. So I invite you on this day to bring to mind those people who continue to live through you in the ways that you give their gifts to the world as you carry on. Let us take a moment in silence together. Now I'm going to transition us to our ritual of touchstones. My name is Reverend Neal Anderson. My pronouns are he and him. This day of Easter is always a day of metaphoraging for me, for there are so many metaphors to be found. I find this is one of those many occasions of the both and, that we hold the both and in this moment, that we know that there is no life without death, for in the natural world it is death and decay that bring new life, that bring beauty. Sarah told us the Christian Easter story. Part of that story is finding the empty tomb with the stone rolled away. Sometimes it is impossible to know in our own lives how that stone is rolled away, offering us new opportunities. So if there are those both ands in your life, the grief, the joy that you hold this morning and you want to acknowledge, we can do that through our ritual of touchstones. Hey, Gwen. Gwen, you interrupted me for a moment. I was really hoping that we would have an Easter parade today. And, I've got it in spades. It's been fantastic. Both Culver and Alessandra have joined you here. So thank you for that, Gwen. Appreciate it. With that moment of interruption, now where was I going with all of... Oh yeah, we were on touchstones. Okay, so back to the touchstones and our moments of both and. So I'd invite you, if you need to roll away a stone, you can roll away a touchstone into the depths of our water. If you want to acknowledge a joy and sorrow, you might wish to do that as well as we engage in this ritual together. invite Martha to drop a few more touchstones in recognition of all those touchstones that you, via live stream, are holding in your minds and hearts, and all those that we have in the sanctuary as we acknowledge those this morning. Learn today that it is the 15th anniversary of the first International Transgender Visibility Day. I also learned that Michigander Rachel Crandall Crocker was the initiator of Transgender Visibility Day. She is the executive director of Transgender Michigan. She reminds us that you do not have to be perfect to change the world. She says, I have a disability, however I change the world. Come and change it along with me. Would you join with me in the spirit of meditation and of prayer? Spirit of life, Spirit of love, we gather this morning with broken hearts. Broken hearts at witnessing to a violent world, witnessing to wars and the many deaths that result, witnessing to the many injustices. And yet at the same time, we also hold those joys that we find in each other, in the beauty that we might find in each day, at hearing a favorite song, a moment of kinship, in passing another in the street and seeing their smile. May we hold the both and of life, for life is complicated and uncertain. It is gorgeous with some things we can count on, and it has those seasons of struggle and seasons of delight. And the two blow in and bloom simultaneously, like now, most likely always. And we are here together, all of us from our different corners, our different families, here breathing together, questing together, witnessing and holding each other through it all, laughing and singing in the face of it. If there is a journey to liberation, if there is a way to live resurrection, I think it is like this. May what holds us in bondage to death or loss or hurt or sadness or literal heartbreaking limits be released. And what gives us life, hope, joy, rebirth, feel invited to claim us, and may we claim it, sinking our roots down into what grounds us, reaching toward the sun, flowering into this season, all of whose traditions witness to life more abundant, claiming us all. For after a season of loss and winter struggles of heart and mind and spirit, And may we open our hearts to the abundance of creation that surrounds and sustains us. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. I thank Vanessa Southern and Allison Jacks for some of those words.
Remaining in an attitude of meditation and prayer, let's join together in song.
It is our practice to give generously to this church as we are able and in keeping with both its meaning in our lives and its impact on the world. We hope that those who have more will give more, so that those who have less can participate fully and equitably in the life of the church. If you would like to contribute to our virtual basket while the baskets are being passed or after service, please visit uulansing.org and click Donate at the top right-hand corner of the screen. Cash and undesignated checks go to this month's recipient of the plate, what we call that, sharing plate, the Davies Project. Thank you.
Deus
There are many different versions of the Easter story, including the telling we heard earlier. Easter is one of the most sacred stories in Christianity, and it may be complicated for some of us. But I want to explore that a little bit. So Christians generally claim 4 Gospels to be part of their sacred texts, and each of which tells about the life and ministry of Jesus of Nazareth. And each of these Gospels has a slightly different version of what happened in the days leading up to and just after Jesus' death. However, those 4 texts all agree, and I was just struck by this, but they all agree that women were the first to come to the tomb on Easter morning. At the very least, Mary Magdalene, and depending on which version, anywhere from just her to a whole group. So the Gospel of Mark was likely the first of these stories to be written down, and that story ends specifically with 3 women, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome. And these 3 women go to the tomb to anoint Jesus' body. Mary Magdalene, Mary, and Salome had been supporters of Jesus during his time in Galilee and made the journey to Jerusalem along with him. They traveled with their beloved teacher, and now that he was dead, they were holding their grief through their traditional customs. They didn't go to the tomb on the Sabbath. They waited until the next morning, a Sunday, bringing their spices for anointing. So when Mary Magdalene and Mary and Salome get to the tomb and find out in the story that Jesus has been raised, the Gospel of Mark says that, overcome with terror and dread, they fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. They were afraid. These women had shown up grieving and maybe already a bit scared since the Roman Empire had just killed their beloved teacher for being an enemy of the state. That King of the Jews phrase, that was a sign that the empire saw him as a threat and as a danger to their power. But in the face of that, Mary Magdalene and her companions show up to the tomb anyway. Despite their fear, they show up to honor their teacher in the ways they knew how, except that in this story, they couldn't even do that quite right, and instead, something downright weird happened. Something miraculous. And while the Easter story is specifically about Jesus, many early Christians didn't limit the presence of beloved forebears to just him, even after death. In discussing some early Christian beliefs about paradise, Rita Nakashima Brock and Rebecca Parker write that resurrected saints were restored to the divine presence and gained spiritual power to assist the living. They were like relatives who'd retired from New York to Florida. The living could feast with them in sacred meals and could experience their presence in dreams and visions. The living could experience the presence of the dead. As Reverend Neal was alluding to earlier, that we might understand that presence in different ways, but that presence is real. And so for those early Christians, the feasts were apparently pretty popular, and they generally expected that their loved ones would visit, including when the living gathered to honor them. Through these meals and dreams, the community found new life, having moved through grief. So I'm reminded of a time many years ago now when a friend of mine died unexpectedly. At the time, I was already in the midst of my own health scare, and then adding on, trying to make sense of my grief for my friend. And in addition to the more formal gatherings, the visitation, the funeral, a few folks got together to plan something else. So I show up to IHOP that night, because of course, we were just going to IHOP. And all of these people who'd been part of overlapping circles of love and friendship filled the entire restaurant. Every table was part of this same group. And in this memorial feast of sorts, old bonds were reaffirmed and new bonds formed. We told and retold stories of our friend making meaning together in our shared loss. I was amazed at how many people, many of whom I'd never known before, showed up for this human, even in death. People who showed up for each other, even in grief. By leaning into community, the grief transformed. It didn't go away. I still feel my own grief from time to time, all these years later. But that grief was transformed from the despair and confusion that sometimes comes with acute grief into a sense of gratitude and connection. Maybe you've had an experience like that. Maybe not. Maybe several. Maybe that has happened in this very religious community. Maybe elsewhere. Regardless, coming together as a community in our grief enables miracles. Maybe not quite so dramatic as what some of the stories say about Jesus, but in this coming together, we can still find healing and hope when things seem impossible. I recently read a powerful essay by the activist Malkia Devic-Cyril, and honestly, just the title really struck me. It was almost a gut punch. To give your hands to freedom, first give them to grief. In their essay, Devic-Cyril speaks from their experience holding grief in, resisting its call in the wake of loss. And they speak to how that plays out in social movements as well. And drawing a comparison to religion, they write, religions prescribe practices to manage grief, and movements need to as well. To be aware of grief and act on it individually is not enough. When social movements have neither the infrastructure nor leadership to enable the mass metabolizing of grief, they fracture under the weight of it, just like people do. Acting on grief individually is not enough. Not for us personally, and certainly not if we want to transform the world. Religions have often had that role of prescribing practices, which tracks with what happens in the Easter story. The women show up with their anointing spices, but not on the Sabbath. In Unitarian Universalism, we sometimes can tend to be proud of not prescribing one particular way of being spiritual or of holding grief. At our best, we recognize and truly embrace that different people may need to show up differently. But the showing up is critical. Yes, sometimes we need solitude in moments of grief, but if that's all we have, then we might be selling ourselves short. We need our community too, and our community needs us. We need to move through life in connection with each other and with something greater than our individual selves. In that essay, Devic-Cyril describes 4 steps for moving through grief, which came out of a conversation with Cheryl Espinosa-Jones. And those steps are, first, to feel the loss fully, to seek solace and comfort, which is where they mention religion, to find inspiration, and to take action from this place of grounded grief. So religion gets specifically called out in seeking solace and comfort, but the journey doesn't start there and it doesn't end there, even in religious community. Here at UU Lansing, part of our mission is to engage in courageous work for peace and justice, to give our hands to freedom, so to speak. That means we must also give our hands to grief and find our grounding in its midst. And there is much to grieve in the world at large, where violent atrocities are still happening every day. In our own lives, where we experience losses known and unknown to the people around us. And in this religious community. So I want to speak to that last one a bit. Here at UU Lansing, there are challenges in our church life. We have shrinking budgets over the last few years, requiring us to make some hard choices. We've lost some longtime staff and gained some new folks. And regardless of how we feel about those changes, change implies the loss of what was. And grief can come with that. But just as important, we're not alone in any of it. The shape of religious life across many communities continues to evolve as it ever has, and especially as we reckon with changing realities in our broader lives and in society at large. Yet this moment is also a moment of opportunity. We have an exciting grant project with the Refugee Development Center, our partners who engage in transformative work right here throughout the whole week. So we're imagining what is possible and other ways that we can enhance that. Enhance the ways that we transform the world, not just in this sanctuary and not just on Sunday morning. There's a lot of uncertainty in all of that. Like the women of the early Gospel of Mark, we could be overcome with terror and dread and run away. But there are also opportunities for something amazing to happen. See, in that first version of the Gospel of Mark, the story ends right when the women tell no one, supposedly. And so what if those women had actually held in their grief? What if Mary Magdalene and her companions really had said nothing to anyone? What if they felt so defeated by empire and afraid to act for their teacher that they never went to tend to his body in the first place? But we know that they couldn't possibly have told no one, because then the story would never have been written. We know that they didn't, in the end, give in to despair. They showed up with their grief and with their fear. They gathered on that morning after the Sabbath and went to their teacher's tomb. As these women moved through their grief together, they found a new life for their teacher in their community. They found healing and hope. And over time, that community would continue to come together to celebrate the fact that love does not end with death. And so we gather today in this community. We gather inspired by awe and wonder. We gather with our joy and with our grief. We gather with love's name, in love's name, and love is here in our midst. Maybe not how we expected it, and maybe not how we planned for it. Maybe our modern equivalents of the burial spices are no longer useful for this moment, but love is still here in its own surprising way. This Easter story reminds me that there's power in showing up in community, even in our grief and mourning. If we bring all of who we are and stay curious, then maybe something miraculous can happen here. Maybe we can find new life too. Sometimes being reminded that there is hope in this broken world is miracle enough. And sometimes that miracle can inspire further miracles, leading us to take action to heal those broken places in this world and in ourselves. May love continue to ever be in our midst, in our present times of uncertainty and grief and hope and possibility. And may it continue to be with us forward into our future.
For our closing hymn today, we'll be singing number 61 in the gray hymnal, Lo, the Earth Awakes Again. But before we start, let's talk a little bit about the idea of what a hymn is. If you go back to the early church, a hymn is a tune and a text, and they're not always paired in lockstep. So the tune that we sing this, bum 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 ba da da dum, is a very familiar tune, but it has a lot of words that can go with it. The text that we're going to sing this morning, Lo, the Earth Awakes Again, is a set of words that metrically fits this. It also speaks to spring and rebirth and awakening. Together, they provide a great feeling to go out in joy today. And I was struck by Martha's comment about running away in terror and grief. And sometimes I see that on your faces when we sing hymns. So I would strongly encourage you to ignore your terror, ignore any feelings of insecurity, just sing. And if you sing the wrong notes, who cares? If you mess up a word or two, well, you've heard me do it a lot. So let's join together in number 61, Lo, the Earth Awakes Again, whatever key you want to sing it in.
Let's now join together in our benediction. As a religious community inspired by awe and wonder, we nurture spiritual growth, connect in authentic, loving relationships, and engage in courageous work for peace and justice. Our worship is over. May our service begin.